This is the Telescopic World Season 3 Chapter 6. In this episode, we will be talking about the system's reactionary process to rejection of an affirmatory impulse. Vocal depth is emblematic of one's ability to sublimate one's impulses from one moment to the next. In the moment one rejects an impulse, the reaction is the creation of a dissonant consensual space. This dissonant consensual space is reined in by the gradual erosion of one's bodily territoriality through the action of external actors. In the rejection of an impulse, the dissonance of the dissonant consensuality radiates outward, generating a lack of synchronization between disparate system members. In other words, all dissonance propagates, which can only be ameliorated by the erosion of the spatial isolation of the actor. To put it another way, the repetition of actions to undermine the territoriality of an actor creates an experience channel which compels choice. In the one hand, one can choose to express a feeling, creating a corresponding expectation channel with consequences. On the other hand, one can reject the impulse, which creates a further reactionary response from local social actors compelling compliance with the effectuation of the impulse. All of this is to say, that dissonant consensualities generate from the rejection of an affirmatory impulse. But these dissonant consensualities cannot propagate without the isolation of the generator. In the enmeshing of an individual within a social network, individuals are compelled to express impulses further to an affirmatory narrative. In other words, rejection of an affirmatory impulse creates a cyclical pattern wherein one is compelled to make a choice between rejection and affirmation, where rejection simply leads to the cycle repeating and being confronted with the choice. For all of this to work, the ability of the actor to sublimate their impulses must be restricted. For sublimation is the product of physical territoriality or vocal depth. By undermining the physical territoriality of the actor, they create the experience channel which prevents sublimation, requiring a choice to express. But there is another option, namely, the sublimation of the impulse so far into the future, that it cannot be undermined by the cyclical pattern defined by a systematic reaction to dissonant spaces. In other words, the creation of an out manifesting as the sublimation of an impulse, ensures the elimination of the cyclical pattern over the course of shorter time frames. In other words, if you wish to understand this podcast episode, you must understand that experience channels relate from expression, while dissonant spaces relate to inhibition or rejection of an affirmatory impulse. But the system reacts by creating integration of the dissonant spaces by undermining the independence and non-contingency of a social actor, by eliminating his or her territoriality which would otherwise undermine the pressure to express an impulse. This can be waylaid by diverting the expression to some future time, sublimation which goes beyond mere minutes, extending into hours. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.